Still on the clock, you guys. I may be all over that. I'm gonna be all over that.
Good afternoon. The March 26th, 2024 regular council meeting is called to order at 4:01. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the March 26, 2024 regular council meeting agenda as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare,
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson, all in favor? None opposed, that carries. There are two sets of minutes for adoption at this meeting. The first minutes are from the March 12th, 2024 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the March 12th, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
Second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favor? None opposed, that carries. The second minutes are from the March 14th, 2024 special council meeting. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the March 14th, 2024 special council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington,
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries. We have one delegation this afternoon from the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District about the West Coast Transit Service. And I believe our delegate is attending by Zoom.
Eddie, we've just promoted you to panelist. You should be able to share your screen.
There he is. Welcome, Eddie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the West Coast Transit Service. I'm imagining everybody can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to go through various items of the system. So talking about various details, we'll go through the routing, the schedule, some of the bus stops and signage, the fares, fare technology, and then some of the marketing that has taken place to date. So just a few notes on the service. So we have enlisted Pacific Western Transit, or PW Transit, to operate the service on the ACRD's behalf. This is the same transit operator that runs the services in Port Alberni, Comox, Campbell River, and Mount Waddington. A very experienced transit operator, very professional, and knows what they're doing when they're providing public transportation. For the implementation of service, the buses used will be the light-duty ARBOC vehicles. This will be an interim option until new vehicles are able to be procured. So these buses are 22 passenger vehicles or 18 passenger vehicles. It really depends on the number of mobility aid spots in use. So if there's one mobility device in place, they're a 22 passenger vehicle. If two are in place, it would be an 18 passenger vehicle. PW Transit will be looking to procure new buses, depending, again, what happens with BC Transit, and we'll talk more about that as we move through. Bringing up the schedule here. So the service operates 7 days a week, except on statutory holidays, and provides 7 weekday and 5 weekend round trips between Ucluelet and Tofino. This equates to approximately 5,700 annual service hours And the cost of the service comes in at approximately $116.50 per hour, for a total full year annual cost of about $670,000. The prorated cost for 2024, because we're not starting till April, is around $507,000. If we were to look at the BC Transit model, which shares a shared services pricing of 50/50, based off 7,500 annual service hours, which was what they had forecasted, the total cost of that would have been $1.1 million, or approximately $525,000 municipal share. So the shared services model, the provincial funding, not having that definitely does hurt the amount of hours we're able to put forth for the same price. However, we are still getting a good service. Whoop, apologies. The West Coast Transit for implementation has been designed to provide that interim base level of public transportation for the West Coast residents, until such a time that provincial funding has been brought forward. So the schedules, the routing, it was brought forth through the West Coast Transportation Working Group, working with the ACRD, working with Watt Consulting, and did go through a public engagement process. So we did ask members of the public what they thought about hours, which spots were left off, and this is the schedule that was put forth and devised as an interim option that would work well for everybody. One of the things to note is, I think, once the service is up and running, we'll continue to work to identify expansion points, ensuring the service is readily available for as many potential users as possible. And this, of course, includes a more extensive route around Ucluelet. When BC Transit was talking through their feasibility studies, one of the first areas of expansion that they had highlighted was potentially moving towards that lighthouse loop. So I think as we move forward, as we see where the ridership really is, that will be one of the options we'll look at. Total within the service, there are 31 bus stops between Ucluelet and Tofino. This includes 5 currently within the district of Ucluelet. However, we will, as soon as some of the work and the service gets underway, we'll be looking to implement new stops on Peninsula Road, and then investigate what we can do at the Millstream area to provide a safe transit stop for the residents there. There are currently 16 in the district of Tofino, really using those Tofino free shuttle stops primarily, 2 in Taistanis Essa 5 in Hitatsu, and then 1 at the Highway 4 junction, and 2 in the Pacific Rim National Park. So again, these are, I think it's key to remember, we're really focusing on getting the service up and running, ensuring that the wheels are turning, that we're providing that interim option for residents, and then looking to improve the service as we go. A little bit here on some of the design of the bus stops. So we'll be using strip signs, similar to what you would see at some BC Transit stops. We do have just the simple West Coast Transit branding. We didn't want to go too involved as far as branding, because when we do look at that, the ultimate option is BC Transit, and we know there will be a little bit of a rebranding if and when BC Transit does come on board. We do have QR codes at the bottom of the stop sign, so this allows users to link directly to the ACRD West Coast Transit website for any information that they need. And then each bus stop will have timing point indicators and the individual bus stop schedules. I think, we talked about implementing different stops once the service is up and running. And similar to that is once we identify the highest traffic areas, it's putting the amenities in place for the users of the system. So those are benches, those are shelters, really just looking forward as we go to improve the system, improve the amenities available. West Coast Transit system, it has been designed as a cashless fare system, primarily due to the amount of administrative back-end work to take cash in. So we have set up Token Transit, sorry, as a mobile device platform. We have ordered visual validators for the bus, so this will allow users to have the ticket on their mobile device, or eventually to have a paper ticket and can just scan that under the validator. The validators won't be in place right away. It will probably be approximately a month or so until they will be. So until that point, the ridership data will have to be manually tracked, and drivers will have to manually check the codes. But once they are in place, we'll have the ability for the validators to kind of track all the ridership and whatnot on their own, which will be a good benefit. Another benefit of the system is that workplaces, local governments, community groups, First Nations can buy and purchase group tickets and provide them to their employees or members via email or phone number. So you do have that bulk purchasing ability, which is a good thing. Transit app, and again, I'm cognizant of time here, so we will have the transit app also available to the users of the system. It allows for passengers to plan, schedule, and track their trip in real time. So they'll be able to see where their bus is, when their bus is forecasted to arrive at the stop, and plan their trip accordingly. Now, similarly with the Token Transit app, it'll probably be a month until this is available on board. We had some issues with ordering some of the routing and getting it installed on the buses. So we're just a little bit delayed on that, but we will have it there. And that's that piece there at the bottom where the operating company is working to have that information that include all the real-time passenger data and bus tracking data as well. So as we work through towards fares, we really tried to set the fares in such a way that the local residents would receive the benefit. In these fares were brought through the West Coast Committee and the West Coast Transportation Working Group. So where you see the big discounts at that monthly pass, a single ride is $5.50. Again, we were looking to balance the pricing between a regional system and a local system, and it's somewhat in the middle. So this price is also on the lower end for a regional system. So that's where that $5.50 fare came from. Children under 12 provincially mandated that they do ride for free. And then it was decided that any students age 12 and above could ride for free with the provision of a valid student ID. So really looking to remove as many barriers as possible for the youth in the communities. And then on our website, we have various marketing documents, they've been provided to the administrative groups of the partners, to the staff here to be ready to answer any questions that come in. So it's really looking at that Transit 101 document, which is a step-by-step process, how to ride the bus, how to schedule, how to plan, how you need to pay, what you do if you lose an item. Really all those items that in a community where we really haven't had public transportation will be very important. And then we do have education being put forth on a peer-to-peer level from the community's Building Youth Futures. Youth Facilitator is providing that training. So we're offering some training out, and then they're providing that training to the youth. And then my last slide, just looking forward to what we've done so far, and then what's upcoming. So we had launched our website on the 14th. We're still active on social media. We've had the ads in the Westerly and on Tough City Radio. Riders guides are going to be distributed out in the area tomorrow. Token Transit goes live tomorrow. All working towards that April 2nd implementation day. And we will have teams on the ground to support that, to answer any questions, to help out with anything that's necessary. And then looking towards an April 9th launch ceremony at the Visitor Center. So I will stop my share now and answer any questions.
Thank you, Eddie. Questions from council? Councillor Kennington, no? No. I had one at our last meeting. We talked about the possibility of seniors riding for free. Is that something that's still being looked at?
Yes, and thank you for that question. Yes, it was discussed at the last meeting and definitely still being looked at. We had talked with Clayquot Biosphere Trust and some other partners about the possibility of potentially being able to provide tickets their way. And then tickets would be disseminated to that group, therefore kind of lowering the necessity of having that user group. I think it's something we want to see how that works. And then if we need to make a push to offer a discounted fare or a free fare, to do it at that point.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to it starting up.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, since our next item is a Committee of the Whole report, I will move that Council move into a Committee of the Whole. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare, all in favour? None opposed, that carries. We are now in Committee of the Whole. We just have one report, 7.1, legislative changes related to public hearings, order of operations. This report will be presented by the Manager of Corporate Services and the Director of Community Planning, Mr. Rotenberg and Mr. Gregg.
Stay right here.
Through the mayor. So we are now in Committee of the Whole, and we're bringing back a report that's asking council to consider 3 approaches to dealing with rezoning applications where public hearings are prohibited. We've discussed this circumstance in the past. Generally, rezoning applications are prohibited, or public hearings are prohibited for rezoning where the application is for residential development. That residential development is consistent with our OCP, and it makes up over 50% of the floor area ratio. The public hearings are also prohibited in the event that council is considering an application or a rezoning to allow for an accessory dwelling unit or a secondary suite in a single family dwelling or single family zoned lot. So that's the circumstance we're talking about here. And what sprung this conversation on and these 3 approaches is discussion between myself and the planning department with regard to whether and when we can have applicants address council. And historically, we've had applicants address council sort of at 2 different times. So I'll just get you to advance that slide for me. So I'm just going to click on this screen right here. Perfect. So historically, we've had applicants address council either at first reading or during the public hearing. And what our lawyers have basically told us is that that number 1, you're not allowed to have a public hearing, which we knew. So that's not an opportunity for the applicant to speak. And number 2, there is some risk associated with having the applicant speak after we've given notice of first reading. So that would be typically when our applicant would speak. We're introducing 3 potential approaches here. The first approach would be consistent with the motion you guys have already adopted. So there would be an application submitted. Staff would analyze and prepare a report. Staff would give notice of first reading, or also known as notice of no public hearing. And then council would consider the report, application, and bylaw. Under this approach, once there's an application, there'd be no opportunity for the developer to speak. There would still be an opportunity, of course, for the developer to speak as a delegation prior to the application. But if there were any changes between the developer's delegation, their vision, their broad perspective, and their application, they wouldn't be able to orally speak to those. Under the second approach, what we're suggesting is that the applicants be able to present when the bylaw is introduced. So the bylaw, under this process, we'd have an application submitted. Staff would analyze and prepare a report. Then staff present a report, the application and the bylaw, and the applicant has the opportunity to present the application. Staff would give notice, and then council would consider the bylaw after that notice is given. Now, the third approach is a variant to the second approach, and I'd like to point out a typo in the report. Under your options table, it describes approach 3 as including the bylaw and the application, but in fact, under approach 3, what's contemplated here is just for the Under approach 3, what's contemplated is that the application is presented, not the application and the bylaw. So under approach 3, you would have an application submitted, staff would analyze and prepare the report, staff would present the report and application, and the applicant has the opportunity to present the application at that point in time. Staff would give notice, and then the staff would prepare the bylaw and present that to council. Can you advance the slide to next? Perfect. Okay, so we wanted to help you guys iron out the differences and the advantages and the disadvantages to approach 1, 2, and 3. So we think approach 1 is probably the fastest. It would take one council meeting, but you wouldn't be able to hear from the applicant. And we think that that could make it slightly more difficult for a less sophisticated applicant. Another way of putting that is that the application would be entirely in writing, and it would have to be pretty fulsome. And staff, I'll let the Director of Planning and Communications speak to this, but we think that this could be more difficult for a less sophisticated applicant to present a really fulsome application. So we're saying basically it's faster, you front-end load the process, council would only consider written materials, but it may be less accessible for the applicant, and there may be less information for the council to chew on. Under the approach 2, we contemplate that there'd be 2 meetings required here. Council would consider the written materials and presentation from the applicant. It'd be more accessible for the applicant because they'd be able to speak specifically to their application, and they'd be able to speak to any differences that there may have been between their delegation, which will be an option to them, and their actual application. Council would also have an opportunity to get their questions answered, which we've seen pretty valuable in the past, and possibly even to give a little bit of feedback about additional information that council may want to hear before staff are directed to give notice of first reading. Under this approach, council would also specifically consider the bylaw and determine whether it was OCP compliant. So we wouldn't have to have a do-over in the event that we used approach 1 or 3, and when council considered the bylaw in the context of the OCP, they disagreed with staff's determination that the OCP was consistent with the bylaw, in which case we'd have to do over because you'd have to do an OCP amendment, and we'd have to give a different type of notice, and there would have to be a public hearing. So under approach 3, and to be clear once again, under this approach we have we think this is the slowest approach, so it will be 3 council meetings. There'd be written materials and presentation from the applicant, but only the application would be presented at this time, not a bylaw. It's more accessible, we think, for the applicant, and more information for council because council could get questions answered about the application, but not the bylaw in this case. We could have a change of course in the event that staff gave notice and council determined that the bylaw was not in fact compliant with or consistent with the OCP in this case. So we think that would take about 3 meetings. And the reason we've said that there's good workflow associated with approach 2 and worse workflow associated with approach 3 is because we think that when staff is drafting a report and giving a positive or negative recommendation with regard to giving notice and consistency with the OCP, staff is actually considering how the bylaw would read. So it makes sense at that point for staff to draft the bylaw and for council to be able to review that bylaw for the first time before giving notice. I just want to iterate again, under approach 3, the bylaw would not be presented when the applicant speaks, but under approach 2, the bylaw would be presented when the applicant speaks. I'm going to turn it over now to the planning department to kind of talk a little bit about the different forms of workflow and why these different approaches may be difficult for them.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I think Mr. Rotenberg has actually covered this really well. I'm just going to add a little bit of my thoughts on it. It seems like this is a bit of like we're trying to find, okay, what's the right balance between speed and some flexibility or nuance for the applicant and also sort of procedural fairness. That as Joey or Mr. Rotenberg described, approach number one would be the fastest, and it would basically be, here's a package, council, there's an application, there's a bylaw attached. If you like it, you could give it 3 readings and approve it, done in one meeting, which is astoundingly fast for municipal rezoning applications, the way this is actually now possible. So there's that, and that has value. The trick with that is it really does rest on having that complete package. And one of the biggest challenges we have is getting complete applications. There's a lot of back and forth that happens with applicants. And particularly if they have no ability to sort of answer questions or kind of fill in the blanks or describe verbally also what their application is, some applicants will be very frustrated and will be challenged to sort of get it across the line. So although approach number 2 would add an additional step, an additional meeting essentially, where it comes to council and council says, okay, we have something in front of us, it's got a shape to it, and the applicant has an ability to address council, that I think that has some real value for a lot of our applications where the applicant can then answer the questions, and many applications, it's there's like sort of a question or a clarification, and the applicant can provide that, and so that then it can, with clarity, move forward. That would then require that we take another step of then, okay, it comes back at a future council meeting, so it's a little slower in the process. And I think as well, there's an element of procedural fairness is to this as well, where in the past, and really, we've had a change of provincial legislation, which is really kind of changing the game. But in the past, really that ability for the applicant to address council is important, because then, okay, they're making sure that what they're asking for is clear, and they can disagree with the staff interpretation. They can, and then say, well, we've read the staff report and we think that, this element is actually better, or they're seeing it wrong, or whatever. So part of that was that there was always a public hearing, and they had an opportunity to address council in the public hearing, hear comments from the community, address those concerns, clarify, point to, oh yeah, we did a traffic study, it's not so bad, those sorts of things. That public hearing venue is now not there for the applicant. So that's why we're sort of looking at, okay, what's the right process that really council needs to give us some direction on how we go forward. And so again, it's sort of this balance of procedural fairness and flexibility for the applicant and speed in the process. And I think, just in my perspective, I think approach 2 seems to be hitting a good balance. In terms of speed in the process, we absolutely support being able to move housing approvals more quickly. We're already, I'd say, quite lean in our process. We're very efficient. That's one of the advantages of being a small municipality is, if you look at the City of Vancouver, City of Victoria, there's about 5 other levels of neighborhood design review and information meetings and committee of the whole and advisory commissions and stuff before it ever gets to council. So this is, I think, we're looking for, I guess, direction or discussion on what the sort of right balance is in our process as we're understanding and getting legal advice on, okay, the legislation's changed, processes have to change, there isn't case law on how these have been sort of scrutinized, and that will come in time. So we're trying to sort of sort this out of what's going to work best for the sort of applicants and applications that we have in Ucluelet. Anything else, Mr. Rotenberg?
I think the main thing that Bruce and I were trying to work out is how council could hear directly from an applicant without breaching the rules of procedural fairness and without breaching the rules against public hearings. And what we've seen historically is that council has heard things from the applicant that they needed to clarify, and they've been able to provide feedback to the applicant. And that's been an important part of our process. And when we were informed by our lawyers that that couldn't happen after notice, I realized that I had to do an about face, and I had to say, this is something that council should consider. So what we're looking for today is direction, and we think it's important to get direction now because we have applications in the queue.
Great, thank you, both of you. Any questions from council about the processes that are being suggested?
I have one through the mayor.
Councillor Kennington.
There's the first two options, speed and then speed minus or speed light. Is there an opportunity to leave that to the applicant? Let's say, as we're calling them, a more or less sophisticated application, one that is complete. Is there an option for that applicant to choose option one?
Through the mayor, I believe yes, that's something that if an applicant were by preference shy of public speaking or just thought their application was completely polished and or were in a screaming hurry to get into council in one meeting, certainly, because one of the things that I think is that I look at the first step and go, I'm not sure, is that giving them an opportunity to address their application is, I think, what's important. If they were to say in their application letter, hey, we think this is the best thing since sliced bread and we want to go straight to council and we don't need to submit it here, here's this great package, then absolutely, I think we could do that. Maybe Mr. Rotenberg.
The only caution there, and we actually discussed this as well, is I described it as seller's remorse. You know, you have an applicant who decides that they want to waive the opportunity to address council for speed, and then it doesn't go their way. You could have a complaint after that. So it's kind of nice to have a single process that applies to all. But it's certainly up to council, and I'm sure we can draft a resolution that would make that happen.
It just seems to me that, you know, if the timeline is tight and they've really crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's and they need to get going and they're willing to take that on, that we allow them to, for expediency's sake. It saves us time and it saves them time, but also giving other applicants who would like to address council the opportunity to, so not picking one exclusively. Those are just my thoughts on it.
But then we're developing a policy that is not our policy. We're letting the applicant decide. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I just delays for some people they can be very costly, right? So a sophisticated applicant is going to have that sophisticated application no matter what. It's more of an opportunity for somebody who may not have everything there and does need to address this. It's almost like saying number one is the policy because we want to get this done and we want housing to be built, but sometimes that means for that housing to be built that they would need to address council because they're looking for some kind of idea of what we're thinking and they just want to make something happen. I see the benefits of both, but if we have to pick one, then we have to pick one.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Anderson? Councillor Moore?
I really see the merit of having, like, people having the ability to speak to us. So I certainly don't want to go solely option one, but I agree there are probably applicants who might choose to waive it. But I would hate to be caught, you know, if things didn't go someone's way and they wanted to claim that the process wasn't quite, you know, wasn't fair because they didn't get to speak. I feel like everybody has the right to present about their application, and so I'm a fan of speed light, as you put it. And we certainly do get times where we offer the option to applicants and they don't choose to speak. That certainly happened in public hearings over the last term and a bit. But yeah, I would be very hesitant to make a policy where you where you could at least speak towards it. But
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward approach number 2. And if we went that route, the applicant is provided an opportunity to speak, but they may choose not to. But it just means that it's done over 2 meetings instead of 1. Right. Councillor Anderson?
And I guess the other thing that you noted in there is the applicant always has a chance to do a delegation as well, right? That's always a possibility for them to speak. I mean, it's hard not to read this and think that 2 is the right answer, but if it were 1, a delegation is still possible, right?
And through the mayor, and the delegation is definitely, it's possible, and we've seen certainly with larger applications, that's something that applicants have taken advantage of, and particularly in recent years, of like, let's introduce ourselves to the community and kind of make people aware, and that's a useful step. And that's sort of ahead of the formal application process, or having public information meetings and that sort of stuff. For larger applications, I think that works really well. It's at what scale do you bother with that? If someone has it's a rezoning, it's kind of technical because I need to change my lot area because I'm doing some little thing. It's like, where does that start? The public information meeting and open houses and all that is probably overkill for something like that. So there's that kind of balance where that's really a choice of the applicant, and it's something that our literature and so we can certainly encourage, but it's really, that's kind of like laying the groundwork and understanding and smoothing the understanding of and giving them more of an opportunity to communicate what they're thinking and get feedback on it early before they get into the formal application process. So yes, that's there, but then we're having to sort of wrestle with, okay, the formal, we have an application and we're dealing with bylaws and whatnot. How do we step through that? And Mr. Rotenberg has something to add.
And our only caution is that after notice of first reading is given, the delegation is not recommended, because now you're in a circumstance where you're kind of holding a quasi-public hearing, and you could have maybe 2 or 3 opposing delegations. This is the applicant's delegation, and this is the opposition's delegation, and effectively you're holding a public hearing at this point.
So the delegation option is kind of like the developers of the Big Beach lot that came and presented their thought process to us just to get some feedback, right?
Through the mayor, yes, we've had a few recently where we had some larger developments that are fairly significant, and they've come to say, hey, so you're aware and the community's aware, this is what we're sort of working on. And in some of those, that's been specifically, I'm thinking like High Focus or the Monado Road development. They're looking, okay, give us your feedback. We'll incorporate that in our application when it actually comes in, that sort of thing. That's a good process. But this is more, okay, when we're getting into the report coming to council, we have to be careful about the public hearing and not holding one or some version of it, as Mr. Rotenberg's.
Exactly. Councillor Mafty?
I just wanted to chime in with my thoughts and start from the most recent point regarding the delegation. I feel that one of the things that struck me when we heard from the Big Beach group, I personally felt that we were caught off guard, and my understanding of how a delegation works is that it's an opportunity for somebody to approach the council and give them information. And although, our feedback might be requested, I don't think that it's an ideal opportunity to give fulsome reply. I think that it's a bit of a wrong way to approach a proposal where a proponent actually wants considered feedback and actually wants an honest opinion. The fact that it's on the record and we might not have context, and that we're really trying to keep it to under 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, it's not ideal. So for that reason, I would steer clear of recommending or following a course of action whereby a delegation is the preferred way or the suggested way that proponents would approach us. So I think the option 2 is a nice kind of Goldilocks compromise. I agree that while some savvy developers might not even bother, and they'd say, look, speed is of the essence. We don't need to worry about getting into the nitty gritty here. I think it would be a mistake to set ourselves up whereby less savvy applicants might be at a disadvantage. So I think option number 2, especially because this is something that we're kind of trying out, feeling out, represents the happy medium. It's an improvement, but it's not putting ourselves in a position where we might say, oh boy, we were really focused on trying to increase efficiency, and what we've lost is communication.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. Option 2 really seems like the fairest way of still speeding things up, but getting some communication flowing between the parties. Any other comments from council?
If I could add a note, just on the role of the delegation, because I know we've had a few recently, and I think that I agree that it's an opportunity to sort of put information out there. It's probably not a great forum for feedback, because council as a body is also having to keep an open mind for what they see as an application down the road, and that's sort of early on. So I think sometimes developers will come in and do a delegation and go, oh gee, I didn't get much in the way of feedback. Well, they're not going to. That's the nature of it. But they also, all of these developments, they're talking to staff beforehand. They should be coming in and having a pre-application meeting or meetings, or we handle all kinds of inquiries, and it's rare that we would see an application that hasn't come in and talked about, well, first of all, what does the zoning allow, and all that kind of stuff. And they may also be talking to councillors individually, saying, hey, we're having this coming forward, and those conversations are more an opportunity for feedback without really a decision-making body having to have it on your desk. So I think that's appropriate.
Great, thank you. Are we in agreement that approach number 2 is the best?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay, then I will move that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council adopt approach number 2 as outlined in report number 24-27 when public hearings are prohibited by the Local Government Act for a bylaw, and that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Since the Committee of the Whole decided to rise and report, the Council Procedure Bylaw requires that Council now consider the Committee's recommendation to adopt approach number 2 in dealing with zoning bylaws for which public hearings are prohibited. Are there any further questions for staff about approach number 2? None? Okay, then I'll move that Council adopt approach number 2 as outlined in report number 24-27 when public hearings are prohibited by the Local Government Act for a bylaw.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Okay, there is one bylaw item on the agenda today. 8.1 District of Ucluelet Parkland Disposal Bylaw number 1334 2024 AAP complete. And I'd like to note that correspondence item 11.1, which is in our agenda package, is a letter in opposition to the disposition. And aside from that, this report will be presented by the Manager of Corporate Services, Mr. Rotenberg.
Through the mayor. So, how do I start this? Okay, so what we're looking for today, the staff recommendation is that council adopt District of Ucluelet Parkland Disposal Bylaw number 1334/2024. As council's aware, this bylaw was subject to an alternative approval process. The reason that the bylaws like this need to receive elector approval because you're disposing of a park. That electoral approval came to a close on March 13th at 4 p.m. We had 2 elector approval response forms filed. The threshold, under an AAP, if the threshold is met, which is 10% of the estimated number of electors, then council cannot proceed with the bylaw unless it goes to assent voting. That's also known as a referendum. 2 responses is well short of the 173 response forms required. I would like to note that one of the response forms did have 2 signatures on it, so that's something to take into account. If council were to adopt this bylaw, we've got to start to think now about the purchase and sale agreement, which this piece of land would be disposed according to. Adoption of the bylaw is a subject on that purchase and sale agreement, so that subject will be met at this point in time, and staff would move forward with the remaining subjects on the agreement and then transfer the property. I don't think there's a lot more to say here. I think council understands what section of this property is subject to the disposal. It's in the northwest corner of Tugwell Field, abutting the with a Forbes Road frontage. It's about 0.21 hectares space, and it's tucked right into the corner there, so there's sort of a slope there. If the property was transferred pursuant to the agreement, council or the district would obtain an option. The option is exercisable in 3 circumstances. The first circumstance is that the land was not used for 6 continuous months as a food bank on the edge. The second circumstance is that the land or the building on the property was not kept in good repair. And the third circumstance is 20 years. So those are independent triggers to this option. If any of them are met, then council, then the district could request the option be exercised. And I believe the option price is $1. So it's nominal consideration whether we sell it to them or exercise the option. And that would be a decision for a future date. Are there any questions I can answer?
I have one. You mentioned the 20-year threshold. So in 20 years, this has to be relooked at?
So it's exercisable. In 20 years, council would have an option to exercise it. They wouldn't have to exercise it, but they could. And then I believe this was referenced in one of the previous reports. Options can't live forever. The Perpetuities Act sets a limit on the amount of time. I can't remember exactly what the limit is. It's either 70 years. But the way that the option is drafted is it's basically the longer of 2 periods. I think it was 70 years or the duration of the Perpetuities Act. But I'd have to check the agreement itself to determine the exact outer limit of that option.
Any questions for Mr. Rotenberg? Councillor Anderson?
I'm going to jump ahead to the opposition correspondence just to I just want to point out a sentence in there because I remember going over the subjects before when we talked about this, and it seemed that there's a sentence in there that says, couldn't it be sold later? A private citizen would own it, and then it would be quite the nest egg when they sold it. But I think the way it's set up, if I'm not mistaken, is that that's impossible, right?
So just to be clear, the property could be sold, but the option would ride with the land.
Right.
As well, the district's holding another provision of the purchase and sale and purchase agreement is that we would have a statutory right of way to enter upon the lands and to store movable goods on that lands. That would ride with the sale as well.
Right.
So yes, the property could be sold, but the option would be exercisable if the property was not used for food bank purposes for 6 consecutive months after 20 years, or if the buildings or lands were not kept in good stead.
Right. So it sounds like there's enough things put in place to keep it being a private sale just for profit in the future, like what the opposition is saying here. But yeah,
Our intention was to do as much as we could to ensure that the land was used for food bank purposes.
Right. Right.
And just for clarity, the option, it's an 80-year window within the agreement, not a 70-year window for the option.
All right. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, there is a staff recommendation.
I am happy to move that recommendation.
Councillor Hoare.
That council adopt District of Ucluelet Parkland Disposal Bylaw number 1334, 2024.
Do I have a seconder?
Second that.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion?
I will say, in response to another comment in the opposition letter, they comment about it being a good spot for expansion of Tugwell Fields. If you know the piece of property, it's actually got quite a slope on it, and it is not somewhere that you could easily expand the fields. So it really is not a highly usable piece of property. The use that the food bank is looking to put it towards is a fabulous way to solve a couple of problems that we have, let alone get them out of a building that is beyond its use.
Beyond its days. Okay, no other further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Yay.
Yay!
Good birthday present.
Yeah.
That's right. Happy birthday, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we're into our reports. 9.1 UBCM Minister Meetings. This report will be presented by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before Council is annual request for direction with respect to booking and requesting meetings with the ministers at the annual UBCM conference. This year's conference is set for September 16th to 18th. I've included a couple of suggested possible meeting requests that have come up over the course of the last year. I'll just quickly run through those. So supportive housing, there's an opportunity to engage with a minister responsible for the grants associated with supportive housing. As council is aware, we were unsuccessful in this last round. We'll be resubmitting at the earliest opportunity, but sometimes it's beneficial to do a little bit of lobby work with the minister responsible to see if we can get that initiative moved forward and relay the importance of the project to the minister. So that could be a possibility moving forward to advance that initiative if it's a key priority of council. The fire hall grants, as council is aware, we have within the budget we need a replacement of the fire hall. They are starting to come up from time to time. I think I've seen one, maybe two opportunities in recent years for fire hall grants, but again, advocating with the appropriate ministry for consideration of future grant applications and the need for a fire hall that provides what I would say is more of a regional service. We did apply for one in 2022, I believe it was, June of 2022. As leveraging it, trying to leverage it for a regional service without success, unfortunately. Again, the program was oversubscribed, as all grant systems are. So again, leveraging advocating for that project with the minister to bring it to the forefront can be beneficial. The next one is the West Coast Transit. So we do have that moving forward. Yes, it is an ACRD initiative, but we benefit from it. So if this is something that council wants to really pursue to get BC Transit to take over this initiative, it might be a good idea to either independently or as a joint request between the ACRD, Tofino, the First Nation communities to do a joint initiative again to lobby consideration of the transit taking over the West Coast Transit in the near future. They did make a promise to say that they would fund it, and then unfortunately that funding was pulled at the last minute back in 2022. The next one that I have is the ongoing cell service coverage for Highway 4. That one is still in the works, but we haven't heard anything. Rogers has indicated to staff and council that they were going to pursue this. It might be just a very slow, time-consuming process, but again, it might be advantageous to keep that initiative on the books and to the forefront of the ministry's minds, that this is still a key priority for our community. Again, this might be a good one for a joint advocacy initiative between Tofino and Ucluelet, if we want to do a joint mission there to see if we can get more weight behind the request. And the last one is a recent one that I had on noted with that council was discussing, I believe, at the last council meeting, was the Coast Guard Coastal Lifeguard Program. This one is a little bit different. We'd have to do a bit of research to find out where to go with this, because it's Parks Canada, which is a federal which is under federal auspices. But maybe there's an opportunity for us to, or council, to go forth to the appropriate ministry to advocate on behalf of the region with the federal government to make this a priority program for the region. So there might be advocacy benefits that we could wiggle in there. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but we can always make the request. And I believe Mayor McEwen also noted with me earlier today that a possibility is requesting consideration of the RCMP pending request. So the RCMP are looking to do make a request for two members. Membership for the RCMP locally hasn't increased in 20 odd years, I believe. So advocating on behalf of the local RCMP detachment for their needs might be also beneficial for our community if council deems that as a priority item that they want to meet with an appropriate ministry with. So at this point in time, I'm looking for a little bit of direction from council with respect to these topics, if they are interested to put applications forward, if there's any other priority areas that council has identified or would like to request ministerial or staff meetings at UBCM.
Great, thank you. I can tell you my favorites. I think it would be Bonwin Ma, the Minister of Emergency Management, for fire hall grants, probably. That's definitely one of my priorities because those grants come up so rarely, and we desperately need a new fire hall, and it's going to cost us a lot of money. The RCMP that we discussed this morning, that's the sergeant is requesting 2 more members, hoping to get 1 because normally he requests 1 and he gets none. So I would like to help advocate for that. The supportive housing, I guess it wouldn't hurt. I don't know how much good that would do to get our application through. I think it's just a process, and we're going to apply through the second round. But the Coastal Lifeguard Program, yeah, that would be interesting to see if we could get some provincial support from that, moving toward the feds. And that could be a joint meeting as well, the lifeguard program, as could the cell service and the BC Transit. Could all be joint meetings.
I was wondering if the lifeguard one could be fit under safety, because isn't there a public safety minister? And that might go to that point. I mean, given the loss of life, I fully support doing something there, because I feel like if you don't stand up and make noise,
nothing happens.
Nothing happens. I mean, and you know, with that in mind, I actually do feel that it couldn't hurt us to try for a supportive housing one. We're a small municipality, and you know, I feel like we get ignored because they see 100 units in Vancouver, but I'm like, bang for your buck per capita. Like, our 5 units would just make such a difference, you know. I would fully be happy to do that. And definitely the cell service. I remember having a long conversation with the Rogers guy about how they were coming out and this was happening. And I remember last year when we were caught, when there was that accident,
That's
and
right.
we were stuck without cell service. And in fact, like even satellite phones didn't work where we were. So there was no way to get information out, you know, and it's like, it's ridiculous. But I agree, that's one that could be joined for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were all heading for a conference.
Yeah, was that, that might have been
AVICC?
AVICC last year. Yeah, it was around this time of year.
Yeah, and Councillor Anderson and Kennington had ended up just turning around and going back home
Right.
because there's no way of knowing how long we were all going to be.
Well,
in
and
that
because that's
lineup.
because there was no power too. Like it was that was that perfect storm, as it were, without a storm because it was a nice day. I remember that.
Yes. Okay, so fire hall grants, RCMP, supportive housing, and then jointly the lifeguard program, BC Transit, and cell service.
Not
Council-
to ignore that health services is on the list too, but we did talk about it. But we do. You guys have a meeting next week.
next week at AVICC. Councillor Mafty?
I was just gonna chime in and say that of the list here, the ones that I personally feel would be priorities in my mind would be supportive housing number 1, health services number 2, and West Coast Transit number 3. And I know that we'll have some opportunity next week to address the health services, but certainly the supportive housing and fire hall are things that have been on my mind as they've come up again and again.
Great, thank you. Does that give you everything you need, Mr. Lawrence?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think what I'm hearing from council, and it'll be captured in the minutes, is that we're supportive of putting applications for all of these initiatives forward, including RCMP. I will make the appropriate requests to the adjoining communities to see if they're interested in a joint application for these. And then what we'll be doing is preparing what we deem as kind of a white paper as the high-level topics that we have, and then request from the organizing representatives. This all goes through, and they decide which ministry they actually want you to talk to. Sometimes they redirect you to different areas depending on who's responsible for the actual file. The only other aspect that will be forthcoming is whether or not we want to do just 1 or 2 representatives from council at the UBCM ministerial meetings that are which ones that are approved, and then we just need to know who would like to attend what. Sometimes not all of council needs to attend all of the meetings, and in the joint meetings it's probably best to have just 1 or 2 representatives from the community at that, rather than 5 councillors or mayor and council as a whole.
That makes sense. So that'll all come through after you submit the
Correct.
requests.
Sorry, I'm just saying, was there any additional topics that any of council wanted to bring forward? I know we went through that list really quickly. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing it, because once this is done, we can always bring this back and consider alternative additional topics if I just want clarity on that.
I think the only addition was the RCMP to the list that's in the.
Yeah, so there actually is a resolution here, which I can make. I will move that council direct staff to prepare ministerial meeting requests on the following topics for the 2024 Union of British Columbia Municipalities Conference. A, fire hall grants. B, RCMP additional members. C, supportive housing. And then the possibility of joint meetings with our neighbors for the lifeguard program, BC Transit, and cell service on Highway 4.
Do we do health services or no?
Yeah, we can include health services if you like. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, let's include health services as well.
Squeaky wheel.
Okay.
Be the squeaky wheel, especially on that one.
I'll be the squeaky wheel.
And can I have a seconder?
I will second that.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. That carries.
You don't ask, you don't get.
I feel like there's some momentum with the lifeguard program right now.
From
Just everything that we're doing right now, and everyone there seems to be some push behind this right now to get it going.
that would be great. Are there any notices of motion? There are 7 correspondence items, and I did note that 11.1 was mentioned during the bylaw item 8.1. Uh, 11.2 concerns over provincial short-term rental regulations effect on existing Ucluelet businesses. I would like to note that staff is preparing a report for council to consider at a future meeting related to this correspondence item on the new legislation which removes legal non-conforming status for short-term rentals. So just, and the planning department has been in touch with the author of this letter as well, I believe. Yes.
Is that if we? Oh, sorry. Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know you get a report coming, but I just if we're not opting in, is this that STR bill that we're talking about, or is this 44 or?
So this is not about opting in. The same legislation has some other stuff in it, and one of the things is making this sort of lawful non-conforming status. And we mentioned that, but it was kind of in passing when we were talking about opting in. So we're aware of this, and we were aware that this would affect some number of the existing B&Bs in the community. And I have had a conversation with Mr. Valentine some weeks ago, and explained, stay tuned a little bit. So just if anyone's watching or is interested, we're aiming at the April 16th meeting, which is going to be a pretty full agenda because it's budget and everything else, but to have a committee of the whole section to talk about some options of how to address this sort of what was lawfully non-conforming just now becoming non-conforming as of May 1st. And so that meeting, the other option would be the April 30th meeting, which is pretty close to May 1st. So we and I think there is some, folks in town who are probably like, where are we going with this? So there are some options of how to sort of address it. And so we will be bringing that forward, and really we'll look for council direction on how to go forward. This is one of those pieces where the rules have changed. So how do we adapt it? And I think some people who have, like Mr. Valentine, have, certainly followed the rules and have established businesses. And now there's this question of like, okay, can we, renew business licenses? Well, we need to address that. And there's some different ways of going about it, I think. So that'll be forthcoming.
So April 16th we're aiming for.
That's what we're aiming for, yes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
11.3 Blackrock Oceanfront Resort signage request. This came up a few years ago, and here we are back again. So really, this needs to be given to staff to figure all this out. Am I correct, Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, the appropriate course of action is that we'd find out exactly what the signage requirements are or what they would like to do. An application would be submitted or a proposal submitted to staff. Staff would review it, make sure it corresponds with bylaws and regulations, and then bring something back to council if required for implementation and a decision on it, and if there's any other options. So we just need a proposal of what they would like to do, and then we're off to the races.
Sure.
Hi, thank you for giving me 30 seconds. Lara Kemps, just speaking on behalf of 596 Marine Drive, Blackrock. I'll just clarify the letter a little bit. We did speak with staff last year, I believe. And then when I was sitting down to put it all together, I'm like, I kind of need a spot to be able to figure this out properly and to put a proposal together. I did add in that letter my thoughts of some of the wayfaring signs. I don't want to highlight necessarily the resort itself. I find that's pretty self-explanatory regarding the rooms. It's taking people. We're off the beaten path, and we need people to come into our food outlets. So my thought is the aquarium is listed on the wayfaring signs. All I'm asking for is to maybe put restaurant on those, the one by the fire hall, the one by Big Beach, just to help kind of move that. And then and I don't know when we have times for Forbes Road to be open, but then we could have another conversation about that. That was just my thoughts. I just wanted to clarify it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So do we need a motion, or staff is just going to work with BlackRock? Okay, perfect. We're working together. Oh, Mark, sorry. Councillor Mafty.
Thank you. I hate to be the one to say this, and with all due respect and support to Ms. Kempson BlackRock, this really strikes me as a little bit of a conflict of interest, because this is a private business that has property of their own to advertise on. I'm a little bit worried at how overtly in your face of a tourist town Ucluelet has become, and I'm just not necessarily sure that it's the responsibility of district staff or this council to work with a private business to see how they can advertise their business further throughout the community. That's my 2 cents. I'm neither for it nor against it, but it does strike me as a potential conflict of interest here.
I think they're not suggesting that it say BlackRock. They're suggesting that it say restaurant. So it's an amenity rather than a business. If that helps.
But I mean, it's a restaurant that's generating profit for a business, and so I'd have the same objection with any other restaurant. The aquarium strikes me as a unique exception to the rule. For a number of reasons, none of which any for-profit business operating in the community would tick those boxes for me. So it's not my place to support this or veto it, but I don't know that I would support it if it were brought to us as an issue to vote on.
Well, I think we've referred it to staff, so staff will figure all that out.
Okay, but if we're referring it to staff, we're in a position where now we're taking it upon ourselves to ask staff to dedicate their time and resources to this issue. So anyway, I've said all that I want to say. I don't want to do is railroad this. So I think I've satisfied myself that I've made my point, and we'll see what report comes back to us.
Great, thank you. Greek Heritage Day, that was yesterday. Uh, 11.5, invitation from the BC Nonprofit Housing Association to attend their event on April 18th. This is the Vancouver Island Regional Education, Networking and Trade Show, with the acronym of RENT. April 18th in Courtenay. They're offering us 2 complimentary passes to attend the event, and I'd like to know if anyone is interested in going.
I think it would be great, but it's a Thursday, so it's a no-go for me.
Councillor Kennington? You're looking at your calendar?
Everybody look at your calendar.
I'm particularly swamped. It's tough right now.
It's a tough week.
It's a tough couple months coming up.
So, no takers? Okay, we'll leave that one, and if you free up some time, then we can always get you registered. 11.6, invitation to the seniors luncheon. That's on April 17th here at the community center. And the topic of discussion will be accessibility. And I think they've asked Councillor Kennington to possibly speak on the committee.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's too soon to speak. Very next week, we're going to be going over the framework and reining it in. So I was simply going to state that there is a public input phase that will happen shortly thereafter, and perhaps we can do something special at the seniors' home, so they don't have to come out. But it's too soon for me to actually speak to it.
Okay. Have you let her know that?
I have not.
You might want to, just in case they want to pick another topic for this lunch.
I'm going to attend, and
Okay.
but I will have no real comments on what the framework is because I don't know yet.
Gotcha. It maybe wouldn't hurt just to let her know that in advance, just in case she wants to have somebody else speak about something different.
I'll do a song and dance.
Okay, perfect. 11.7, ACRD invitation to collaborate on a food security emergency planning project. They've been awarded a grant to explore emergency planning and preparedness needs from a food security perspective. And I don't see why we shouldn't partner in this initiative.
I feel very strongly that we should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They would like a written reply by April 19th. Do we need a motion for that?
Madam Mayor, no, I think you can push this one over to staff. We will reach out to the ACRD and let them know that we're interested, and I'll look at an opportunity to have a staff member engage with them on this initiative.
That would be great. Thank you. All right, we're into information items. There are 5 information items, including 2 information reports. The first information item, 12.1, Council Strategic Priorities Update, is a staff report, and this report will be presented by Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before Council is the quarterly update. It's a little bit delayed. I got occupied with some other priority items, but we have made a little bit of progress on some of the priorities as listed out in the strategic plan. The Victoria Road lift station bypass is completed. The 5-year capital plan is in pretty good shape. It still needs some more work, and it's an ongoing process, and moving on to the 20 and 30-year capital plan that will lead into the annual 5-year capital plan. We're happy to say that Lot 13 affordable housing agreements are signed, so the bilateral and trilateral agreements have been executed. We've hired a director of finance, which I am over the moon with so far. Short-term rental legislation, this is a big file. It will be ongoing, but we have completed some of the initial reviews, as was the priorities, and there's a lot more priorities that are coming out of that legislation that will fill out the planning department's time for the next decade or so. The operational capacity, operational capacity development. We've rolled out the new organizational structure for the operations and parks team. That seems to be taken on fairly well, of making sure that they're working as a cohesive unit to bolster their functionality. And then the privacy management program. So staff have updated that guidelines are complete, and we've rolled it out to the senior management team. So we're getting more and more in line with the legislation that is out there for privacy management, and are able to make sure that we're meeting those obligations. I'm recommending that and suggesting that Council give consideration to do another mid-term strategic planning session. We can facilitate that with a facilitator, or do this completely in-house on a more informal basis. But I thought I'd ask Council, halfway through, especially with 3 councillors being brand new to the Council table, doing the strategic plan right at the beginning is sometimes very challenging. Now that we're well into the term, this is a good opportunity to sit down, review the discussion that we had at that initial planning session, and then confirm or adjust, transition, modify, whatever the pleasure of council is at a strategic planning session. Moving forward to update that plan and make sure it actually reflects the goals and objectives, short and long term of council.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lawrence? I think a midterm strategic plan review workshop would be a great idea. I don't think we need a facilitator. We can save some money and just do it in-house, maybe an afternoon. When are you thinking?
Seeing that we're at the end of March already, probably late April, early May would be the recommended time. But what we'll do is we'll reach out to council outside of the council meeting and find out what times work. We'll schedule a special council workshop and plan for an afternoon or an evening or whatever the pleasure of council is. I know there's everybody is very busy with work and other obligations as well. So we'll work with council to find an opportunity where we can have a fulsome discussion, but also be very cognizant of council's other obligations outside of the council table.
Perfect. Thank you. The next item is 12.2, resolution tracking, March 2024. Any questions from council? Looks like that BlackRock sign is going to go back on the tracker. It was on there for a few years. No questions? I'll move on then to 12.3, UBCM subscription renewal letter. This is to renew our annual membership with UBCM. I thought that was an automatic thing, but it comes to council for our approval.
They submitted the letter, so we're passing the correspondence on to council, but we renew this every year.
Great, let's just do that.
Already done.
Excellent. Anybody want to bring 12.4 or 12.5 forward? No. Okay, mayor's announcements and council committee reports. Councillor Anderson. Yeah, you're always first.
Yeah. It's my whole life. With the Anderson
It
with an
starts
A.
with an A, that's right.
So only really two things that I got to since the last meeting, and one was the Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Committee, and Councillor Kennington was with me at that one, and I think in person, I'm trying to remember, it was the head of the chamber, Josh Jenkins, Ian Riddick was there, and Craig Stewart. I think, was there anyone else there? There were some people on Zoom.
Judy Gray was on Zoom. One other fellow was on Zoom.
Yeah, I can't, for some reason, I'm drawing a blank on
Same much.
his name. Yeah. Yeah, no, it was interesting. Yeah, it was good to, it was just our inaugural meeting, so just sort of getting our feet wet and talking about what the purpose is. And yeah, it would be interesting to see things move forward with that. The other thing that I had was the ACHN meeting this month, and with Marcy and the gang, and Penny Cote and all, Tony Buston, etc. And yeah, those are always good. They always have their updates with the community youth futures. And one of the things that is happening now, I had a note on this if I could. Here it is here. There's a foundry going into Port Alberni, which is basically a drop-in center for. It's an integrated healthcare unit for youth ages 12 to 24 for access for people suffering from substance use, harm reduction services. So that's pretty interesting. That's not cheap, and it's paid for by, I can't remember the name of the organization. I should have it as on the tip of my tongue. But they have them all over BC. I think there's 12 of them in BC now, and they're really neat. Their funding is up to $4 million for that, and it's basically a really nice drop-in center. And yeah, it was the design and everything is sort of to make it a place where youth want to go. So they did it, but then when the youth first came for the first opening day or something, they said it looked like a dentist office or something like that. So you can't please everyone, but yeah, it looks really cool. It's a good idea, and that's it for me.
Great. That foundry sounds really interesting. Whereabouts in Port is it? Do you know?
I don't know. I wanted to say that, and I don't see it in my list here. Somewhere.
Somewhere in Port.
Somewhere in Port. I can ask tomorrow. I'm at an ACRD meeting tomorrow, so I'll ask. Okay, Councillor Hoare.
That does sound like a good idea and a needed item.
Totally.
So that's brilliant. I've been pretty quiet. Just attended the budget open house, as we all did. So I don't have a lot to say about that, but I'm just going to... I always have something to say because I'm not going to be completely quiet. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine who hikes the Canso Bomber regularly, and Parks has been building boardwalking to make it easier to get out and less muddy and all of that. And now the trail is marked, which it wasn't for the longest time. And it's a much more published trail. And she hiked that trail back in the early 70s when she first moved out here. And there were still windows in the Bomber, and the Bomber was still up the hill. And now the Bomber is, you know, as anybody who's been out there knows, absolutely covered in graffiti and in really bad shape. And she saw people literally up on the wing struts jumping up and down to see if they could break them. And I'm kind of like, this isn't a national park. It's not a grave site, as a lot of crash sites are, but it is a historic site. And I'm on my high horse here about, you know, protecting historical items. There was somebody who came out to see the Bomber at the same time she did, whose father had been had done water bombing, not out of here but other places. And so somebody who makes a point of, you know, visiting these kinds of sites and taking pictures that she can show to her mom because her father's long passed away. And, you know, and I just thought, you know, and here it is, and it's just absolutely covered in hashtags. And yeah, anyway, so it's just me on my high horse. Maybe you don't need to destroy the historical items. Maybe you don't need to break that little piece off or write your name on it or carve your name into that tree or that bench or that Bomber wreck. Just saying. Getting off my high horse, I just want to remind I'm sure there's a million small children watching us tonight. There's an Easter egg hunt on Sunday. BlackRock sponsors it. It happens at noon at Big Beach. So bring your little kidlets, Mr. Rodenberg. And they do have separate areas for the really young amongst them, and as well as areas for the older kids. And I believe it is tonight that they are looking for volunteers to help stuff the eggs. Thousands of eggs. Just saying.
That's great. So yeah, thanks. Good plug for BlackRock. Councillor Kennington.
Along with Sean, went to the inaugural Economic Development Committee meeting. Lara was there briefly. That was one person that was sitting next to us. Yeah, just getting started. It's got some teething issues, but we'll figure it out. Looking forward to bringing some seaweed conversation to that one.
Totally.
That's a great idea.
And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Mafty.
Attended the budget meeting, a number of the Whale Festival events, some of which I saw my fellow councillors at. The Whale Festival was really nice this year. Everything that I attended was great. Everything that we were involved with was great. And my understanding from Sarah Watt, the organizer, is that it was a success. And so that's always nice to see. And of course, we had some spectacular weather and some great whales during the festival. So that's always a bonus as well. Nothing else to report at this time. I did want to just chime in and echo some of the points that Councillor Hoare made about the bomber, because as chance would have it, just before this meeting, my own kids were showing me photos. They, for Christmas, got like this little old school digital camera that they're quite taken with. They hiked that trail, and they were telling me all about the plane and how it's so completely covered in graffiti, and they were showing me these photos. So it was the weirdest thing to hear Councillor Hoare talking about this. And the one thing that I'd say is I think it's in a bit of a weird place, because it's on an unsanctioned trail that the park has, to my understanding, really done everything that they can to dissuade people from hiking out there. And I think that's kind of created a bit of a clandestine vibe to it, which has probably encouraged people to, abuse the artifact, because it's sort of, it's like it's not supposed to be there and they're not supposed to be there. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, but it's certainly quite disappointing. But that's neither here nor there as far as the report.
I'm gonna make one comment, Councillor Mafty, and just that, yes, in the past it's been very clandestine and you had to know how many power poles and all of that, but now they're actually building boardwalk. So if they're doing that, they've got to be sanctioning that trail in some way, right? That's just that would be how I'd read that, right?
It's really weird, and I don't want to speak for anyone at the park, but I know lots of folks who work there, and I know folks who work in visitor safety, and I think they're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, because at the same time that historically they haven't wanted to, even divulge the location and actively discourage people, there are so many people hiking out there that I think they're probably in a position where they have to consider the liability implications. And so again, this is something that I'm sure the park could give you more information on. I certainly don't have it, but yeah, I'd be surprised if they were going to start advertising it as something to do within the park, the same way they do with the Rainforest Loop or the Bog Loop, or any of the other actual sanctioned trails. But regardless, it doesn't follow that if it's encouraged or not that people should be debasing it. But I suppose it's inevitable.
It's amazing how many places it is published. When I had the conversation with my colleague today, I just did a quick Google web, and I knew it was in the West Coast Trails book that the Westerly puts out. It's on all trails, rated at a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely do this hike, and it's on so many trail lists. And
it's an institution,
right? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my kids have been out there for crying out loud, and they're little, so yeah, it's anyway, but yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. For myself, March 13th, I was at an ACRD Committee of the Whole meeting. It was a presentation by Island Health, so it was a special hospital district board meeting, and Island Health was looking for some funding toward our medical center, as well as toward the Tofino Staff Housing and Sobering and Assessment Center. And that decision was deferred because the request sort of came out of the blue, and we needed more information to and it's a little bit late to get it into anybody's budget at the moment as well. So the decision was just deferred on that one. And then in the afternoon on the 13th, I was at the ACRD regular board meeting, and the Long Beach Airport Terminal Building expansion decision has been supported by the board. So that's going to go ahead at the Long Beach Airport, the terminal building expansion. So that was really good news. 14th, I was at the budget open house here at the UCC, as was everybody else. On the 19th, I attended the Tokwat OCP public hearing, and I was one of two guests there. But anyway, I have a copy of their OCP, their official community plan, if anybody is interested in looking at that. And then for the Whale Festival, yeah, it was a big success this year, partly due to the weather, I think. I was on the 15th at the Art Splash reception over at Blackrock. It was by far the most pieces of art that they'd ever had in that show. On the 16th, I was at the Chowder Chowdown, and the Wickaninnish Inn won, which they haven't done for some time, so that was really nice to see. On the 17th, I went to see the parade in Tofino, and on the 24th, I helped give out trophies to the Total Fluke Pickleball Tournament. So that's that wasn't officially a Whale Festival event, but they used the Total Fluke moniker just to sort of be a part of the celebration of the whales. So that was kind of fun, and yeah, it was really good. The parade was amazing, but it was really stressful because up to even a week before the parade, there were only like 3 floats that agreed to go in it. But then, of course, typical West Coast, everything's last minute. So it turned out to be, I think, the best Whalefest parade we've ever had. Okay.
Dare I ask you who won the pickleball?
I didn't recognize them, actually. They had 10 out-of-town teams come to participate, so it's actually a little tourism boost for us, too, because they had to stay here for the weekend to play. So I did recognize quite a few people. There were about 50 people there on the Sunday. Trevor said there were double that, like 100 there on the Saturday. So it was a really well-attended event.
Cool.
Do you know when we find out whether that letter of support that we gave for the grant for the co-op, do you know when that gets decided on?
That's a co-op grant program, so I don't know.
I can ask Lori tomorrow, unless she happens to be, watching. In which case she can text me. But I will let you know, because I'm not sure when it comes out. Sorry.
Okay.
I think we also provided a letter of support for the skateboard group for that same grant, right? Okay, question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within Council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. Are there any questions from the audience? Seeing none. Seeing no audience, yeah. Are there any questions by Zoom or telephone?
Seeing as we have no attendees on Zoom,
There would be no questions
there would
then.
be no questions.
Have we received any questions by email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
We have not received any questions, although there is a correspondence item which can be addressed at a later date.
Okay, thank you. There is no need to go into a closed session today, so may I have a motion to adjourn the March 26th, 2024 regular council meeting at 5:39? Councillor Hoare.
I'll second that.
Better if I turn on my
Councillor
microphone.
Hoare moved. Councillor Anderson seconded. All in favor? And that passes. Great. We are now adjourned. Okay.